So it's official. UCLA and USC have left the Pac-12 and moved over to the Big Ten. Obviously, this is a monumental decision. It's going to have major impacts across the country, but how did we get to this in the first place? Now, a lot of people are going to point to Texas and Oklahoma, and obviously that was a huge domino to fall, them moving over from the Big 12 to the SEC as soon as 2024, and that they're two premier programs moving over to expand the SEC there. But this really started with some of the Pac-12's decisions, especially those of the former commissioner Larry Scott, who did not do a good job in getting TV deals for the conference, for the Pac-12 network, and really trapped the Pac-12 in terms of the revenue that they could make going forward. And teams like UCLA and USC, they're looking at making more money than, they currently are able to make in this system. And a move to the Big Ten is just so appealing when you look at the TV deal that the Big Ten is going to make. And the Pac-12 is kind of stuck right now. They don't have a TV deal in place for the future, and they're on the Pac-12 network right now, which isn't doing as well as they thought it might be doing. So that ability to escape that situation in the Pac-12 is really what drove this move. And then you look at the landscape of where college football especially is going. Listen, this move was made across all sports, so it does affect more than just football, but football is the main moneymaker here in terms of TV deals, people going to games. Football is the moneymaker for college athletics. Besides the tournament, that also makes money. But in terms of, the whole season, football is the big moneymaker. And if you look at where the college football landscape is going, we are going towards two conferences, and we'll talk about that later. But it was time for USC and UCLA to jump ship and not get left behind, because at the end of the day, some schools are going to get left behind. And when you're in those markets, you want to get in a good situation as soon as possible. You don't want to risk being in a situation where a couple of schools leave and now you're stuck wondering, where do we go? Did we miss out on an opportunity? So they saw this opportunity on the table and they ran and grabbed it, leaving the Pac-12 to go over to the Big Ten. Now, there's obviously a lot of parties involved here, but let's look at the two schools that moved over to the Big Ten, being UCLA and USC. Obviously, two premier programs. You look at the history of USC football there with Pete Carroll, their national championships. And, football is the main driver behind this move. There are other sports involved. Obviously, UCLA basketball, one of the most historic programs in the entire nation with their 11 national championships, has a fan base behind it. They'll definitely move into the Big Ten basketball wise and be a force there, may even be the best team the year that they join. But you look at football as the main driver here, and USC obviously is a huge get for the Big Ten. They bring in Lincoln Riley now. They're gonna get recruits, maybe some more from the East Coast after this move. And you look at just the history behind this program, joining other historic programs like Ohio State, like Michigan, even a Michigan State, a Penn State, stuff like that. So you look at adding a brand like USC, and then UCLA, they're on the rise. They had an 8-4 season last year. Let's see what they do this year. But, adding a team like USC is huge for the Big Ten. It kind of gives them a punch back to some of the moves the SEC has done, adding Texas and Oklahoma. So I think that USC and UCLA are going to benefit here from the recruiting aspect of being able to now reach out to some East Coast recruits. And you can say, well, their West Coast recruits may be hurt by this move, as a kid in California now might go to a Big Ten school and their parents can watch them when they come out to play UCLA or USC. But I think that this is also going to allow UCLA and USC to reach the East Coast, be on national TV a little bit more, and get some more exposure, which is obviously good for both of these schools. Is they've kind of struggled in recruiting. USC has obviously kicked it up since they've gotten Lincoln Riley, but Both schools have not had the best luck in recruiting, and I think that this move will help both of them, and I think it'll elevate both of these programs. They're going to be playing in a much more difficult conference in the Big Ten, but I think that now they'll be able to get higher level recruits, and we'll see how UCLA does. And I mean, even USC, we don't know what they're going to look like in 2 or 3 years, if they're really going to be a truly elite program. But they're going to have to face some dogs in the Big Ten. You look at some of the top teams: Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa. I mean, there's a ton of really quality teams in the Big Ten, and they're going to have to up their game, because if they come in, not at an elevated level, they're going to get smacked around, and they're going to really struggle to start out. So they're going to have to up their game, get some better recruits in there. But if you look at both of these programs, I think in the long term, it's going to help them, really compete to be one of the premier elite programs in the country. And at the end of the day, this move just signals a bigger TV contract for the Big Ten. Adding the LA markets is huge. It expands the viewership of who's watching the games. Now you got people from California that are going to be watching Big Ten games that might not even be for UCLA or USC, but just because now they have a vested interest in the conference, they'll be watching those games. And more people are going to be watching some of these West Coast games with UCLA and USC in it. So this Big Ten deal is going to be massive. And for the conference overall, all the teams involved, this means more money to these programs, and ultimately that'll probably lead to a better product on the field. And now when you look at the layout of the Big Ten, you have 16 teams, and this move ultimately opens the door for even more moves and some more programs to the Big Ten. Could we see a Notre Dame? Could we see an Oregon, a Washington, probably not Arizona. They'd probably look for a higher quality program like a Utah, something like that. So we'll see if any other teams move over to the Big Ten. I would expect it, and we're going to get into how this move affects other conferences as well, starting out here with the Pac-12. Now moving on to the Pac-12. I mean, this puts them into a real tough situation here. They have no UCLA, no USC, losing the LA market, which is super tough, because that's a big part of the reason why people tune in to Pac-12 games. And now they lose the LA market, which is definitely going to hurt their ability to get a big TV deal. And it's going to be tough for them if they don't find another 2 to 4 teams that can join the conference and bring in some other markets. Could they go after a San Diego State, or could they try to reel in one of the Big 12 teams, or any other team out there to kind of bolster this conference? Because right now the 10 teams that are in it are probably not enough to really draw a big TV deal. So I think they were already struggling to draw in a big TV deal, and now losing their 2 premier programs in the conference is really tough, especially because you're losing that LA market. So we'll see where the Pac-12 goes from here. Will it stay afloat? Will it lose some of its members? Could an Oregon or a Washington or a Utah or any of these teams, Arizona teams, could they leave? I mean, we'll see, but it'll be interesting to see if they possibly merge with the Big 12, or maybe they form a dual coast league with the ACC, something along the lines of that, to keep the conference afloat. But they're going to have to do something, because this puts them in a very difficult situation. So where does college football go from here? We've seen some huge moves in the past year with Texas and Oklahoma, now UCLA and USC, big time programs in terms of where they're located and the power that they hold. And now we really do not know what is going to happen next. Could a Clemson move to the SEC? Could a Notre Dame move to the Big Ten? These are like monumental dominoes that need to fall in order to see what the next step is for a lot of other schools, because the Big Ten may be looking to add an Oregon or Washington, but they're still waiting on Notre Dame. And if Notre Dame decides to move to the Big Ten, maybe they leave out an Oregon or Washington and now those schools are left behind looking for a place to play because the Pac-12 is no longer viable for their needs, and it really puts a strangle on what they are able to do as a program, because they're not going to be able to get that big TV deal if they stay in the Pac-12, if the Pac-12 doesn't find a way to add some more teams. So we'll see what the Pac-12 does. Does it add another, premier program from the Big 12? There's not that many left, so it's going to be tough to see which conferences merge, how this works, but college football is changing forever, and this only sped up the process because more changes are coming, and I guarantee you before the start of next season there will already be a couple more changes in this realignment process, and some big dominoes will fall. Clemson, Notre Dame, some ACC teams, we could see a ton of changes happening in the coming months here, so we will see. But it's going to be really interesting to see how these West Coast teams now move over to the Big Ten. You look at the brands of UCLA and USC bringing in that LA market to the Midwest and East Coast. So we're going to be moving towards more of an NFL style here, maybe 2 super conferences. But right now, we just have this move here, which opens the door for all these other moves. We'll be on the lookout to see what else happens. But for now, it's just UCLA and USC. They're going to be going to the Horseshoe to play Ohio State, and the Big House to play Michigan, and they're going to go play Penn State, and they're going to have to travel in December or in November to play Michigan State in the cold. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out and where these teams stand once they move over to the Big Ten, and how other teams stand when these teams leave the Conference of Champions, the Pac-12, as Bill Walton likes to call it, the Conference of Champions. Probably not the Conference of Champions anymore, because their 2 big dogs just left the conference for the Big Ten, and this could be the end of the Pac-12 as we know it if they're not able to add any teams, make some adjustments, combine. But like I said, a lot of conferences are going to be having discussions whether they're going to be combining, or we'll see. But this is a huge move. Let me know what you think of it down below. Is it good? Is it bad? How does this affect other teams? What is going to happen going forward? But if you enjoyed, please leave a like on the video. And that is AK21 out.